Hi, welcome again to TypePy Tutorials. In this video, we are going to talk about how you can reorganize the GUI elements in your TypePy application with partials, dialogues, and panes. This is especially useful if you are building a multi-page application or you want to have a page that pops up and prompts the user for some input. To save us some time, we'll be using the application that was built in our previous video about layout. I'll put the link in the description below and also the source code that was used in that video. And now, let's get started with partials. Let's discuss the concept of partials, what it is and how is it useful in GUI design. In order to answer that question, let's say that you're doing the front end of an application and you have a template, or maybe just a small part of the page that will be reused multiple times in your application. It wouldn't be wise to just copy and paste that part, as this may complicate the application with repeated codes, or it may reduce the efficiency of the application with unnecessary renderings of the GUI. So, instead of doing that, let us define a partial that contains only the part that will be repeated, and whenever necessary, we can simply make an instruction to insert that partial into the GUI. This may sound obvious, but is incredibly useful when dealing with a complex application. Let me demonstrate what I meant. In TypePy, you can set up a partial from a Python string variable that follows the Markdown format. Let's say that we are in the process of building this page in our TypePy application, and we also have a string variable a that contains an imaginary set of instructions that we know it will be repeated somewhere in our application. One way of adding the variable a to our current page will be to use the string concatenation in the navigation bar initialization, which is here, which would create a new Python string variable and assign it with the current page. This is not using the concept of partial. It is also not a convenient way if you want to add something underneath the page, and for debugging purposes, it won't be easy to trace back what went wrong as a concatenation only happens at the end. You can think of partials as reusable modules that are independent and separate from a page. Because of those properties, we will convert the string a into a TypePy partials, and instead of using string concatenation, we will allocate a slot in the GUI and assign the partial to it. Let's have a look at the string variable a here. As you can see, this is simply a string that follows that augmented Markdown format, just like a simple TypePy page. In order to convert this string variable to a partial object, for instance, partial a, we just need to call the addPartial method on the GUI instance of your application and have the string a as an argument. And that's it. You now have a partial object that can be reused anywhere in your application. For instance, I would like to have a partial a as the content of a drop-down section in this page. This could be done in just one line, since we just need to add an expandable visual element in page 3 and assign the partial parameter to partial a. Let's do it now. As you can see, using partials is a neat way to organize chunks of front-end contents, which helps simplify your code and greatly reduce the development time. So now you know about TypePy layout, multiple page navigation, expandable, and drop-down. Those are very useful to organize your application such that it will be intuitive to the users. Let's now talk about how to maximize your GUI design with the use of layers in your page. Let's start with the side pop-up, or TypePy GUI pane object. Something like this would come in handy whenever you have an information that's related to the application, but you don't always want to show it. Here's an example of the pane that I was talking about. In this case, it was displayed on the left side of the screen and takes roughly 80% of the available space. But you can always modify the parameters such that it will be anchored to the left, right, top, or bottom side. Let's now add a pane to our application and let partial a be its content. Here's the general syntax of adding a pane visual element. We first need to create a Boolean variable that equates to true if you want to display the pane and false otherwise. In order to fill the content of the pane, you can use either the page or partial parameter. In our case, we'll be using the partial A variable, which can be done by just assigning the partial parameter to partial A, just like an expandable from earlier. In fact, we want to make it to the next level. Let's now add a button to trigger the display of our pane. Here's the general syntax of adding a button. Now we set the show variable to false, which this would make our pane hidden, and assign a lambda function to evaluate the show pane to true when the button is clicked, and that's it. As you can see here, even when we refresh our TypePy application, the pane is always hidden. But as soon as we click on the button, a window pops up and shows us partial A's content. Let's review how you can use partials in your application. I will create a string variable b here and add 2 simple TypePy charts to it. Then I'll add it at the end of page 2 with the use of Python string concatenation in order for it to be shown on our application. Here's the result. With TypePy charts, you can even select a portion of the graph to see the numbers more precisely. Previously, we have discussed about how string use concatenation may cause a few problems, so let's now convert it into a partial. In order to initialize a partial, first we need to call the addPartial method on the GUI instance of our application, and then indicate a string as the argument, which in this case is b. Assign this with a variable name. We'll be using the name partial b, and now we have another partial object that can be used anywhere in our application. In fact, there are many ways to include a partial to a TypePy application. We have now used the expandable and panes as our container for partials, so now I will introduce you to dialogues. Dialogues are forms that can be displayed on top of the page that the user is looking at. It is especially useful to showcase a performance chart or prompt the user for inputs. We have implemented dialogues such that it is very customizable. Just like any other TypePy visual element, you can specify the width, height, visibility, labels, or trigger an action when the dialog is modified. Here's the general syntax of adding a dialog. Similar to the previous application page, we will also set up a button that triggers the dialog whenever it is clicked. I will position the button in the center of the second column, just after the chart, which is here. Let's now center it. So now, whenever TypePy registers a click from the button, it will assign the value true to show dialog to make the dialog appear. I hope that you enjoyed this video and perhaps find it useful for your TypePy applications. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions for TypePy, please go to our discussion page at typepy.com/discussion. Otherwise, you could check the gallery on TypePy website, where you'll be able to find templates for multiple projects that we have built just for you. Thanks, and see you on the next tutorials.